Hey everybody, Darren with the White Hatter, and welcome to this year's summer series on Thinkable Thursdays. Let's get after it. Hey everybody, Darren with the White Hatter, and again, welcome to this year's Thinkable Thursday series, where we're going to be interviewing subject matter experts on issues surrounding social media safety and digital literacy that we believe parents and teens need to hear about. And this is going to be a full series, much like we did last year, and today we are so happy that we have our first guest, who is Mia Golden. And Mia is the coordinator of the Pacific Center for Crime Reduction here in Victoria, British Columbia. She's also a member of what we call the MIST team. I'll let her kind of introduce what the MIST team is all about. And what's really cool about Mia? She's Canadian, eh? She lives here in Canada in the Greater Victoria area. But you know what? Not only does she work with youth, but a lot of people don't know this. She's also an actor and a director. And again, we'll talk more about that in the interview today. In fact, she's going to have a new documentary coming out called Tug of War. And we are really excited. We are actually interviewed for this. And we'll have her talk a little bit more about Tug of War as well, where she talks to survivors of individuals who were targeted online by sexual predators for things such as human trafficking, kind of the topics we're going to be talking about today. But before we get going, I think it's important, especially because we're going to be talking about a topic that can be sometimes quite dark, right? I think it's really important to understand that most of our kids who are online are doing super uber cool things. They really are. They're being really good digital citizens, right? So I don't think that we should lose sight of that, and that the internet has created all kinds of opportunities, all kinds of positive opportunities for youth. In fact, we here at the White Hatter have just hired a summer student, 16 years old, first name is Keegan, and he is doing all of our post-production video work. Unbelievably talented. For those of you that have never checked him out, you got to check out his YouTube channel. He's known as Citrine Animations. Check it out. Just unbelievable. So it's creating all these opportunities. However, with those opportunities, the internet now allows private and immediate access to children and offenders both inside and outside of the home, right? Like, if it was a sexual predator who wanted to target our kid, a lot of times it happened outside of the home, unless it was somebody who the child and parent either knew, loved, or trust, right? Like, we know that when it comes to sexual predation, in most cases, it is going to be somebody who the child and the parent or the caregiver know, loves, or trusts. But what's interesting about the internet is it is now opened up to people who the child doesn't know. In fact, one of our favorite researchers, Dr. Sonia Livingston, and she's a sociologist, and she looks at what goes on with teens, youth online and social media. Here's what she said. She said, the very same characteristics of the internet that make positive contributions possible, such as immediacy, portability, intimacy, unconstrained reach, and lack of supervision and regulation, have facilitated serious social, intellectual, and mental health skills as well. And that's what we're here today. We're here to talk about some of those dangers, especially when it comes to sexual predation online. And to do that, we are bringing in our guest today. And there she is. There she is. Hi, Mia. How are you?
Good. How are you, Darren?
I'm doing super uber well. So, I gave a little bit of an introduction about who you are, but why don't you share with everybody who's watching us today who you are, what you do, what brought you to this field, and then we'll get into the Q&A. So let's hear from you.
Well, you gave a really great introduction. Thank you. You asked about MIST, the Mobile Youth Services team. And it's a team made up of 2 counselors and 1 police officer. And our mandate is to work with young people, youth, which unfortunately is getting younger and younger, around the areas of exploitation prevention. So that's grooming and recruitment for things like sexual exploitation, trafficking, and gangs.
Now,
so that's us in a nutshell.
And so you're a family and youth counselor, correct?
Yes.
And how long have you been doing this work for?
Well, I've been in the field about 25 years. I was 10, Darren, when I started. No, I've been.
She also brings humor to her job as well, everybody. That's why I just love her, right? Like, she's just amazing.
Well, yeah, the humor definitely gets you through some of the darker things that we will talk about for sure. But specifically, the work that I've been doing with the exploitation prevention, I've been doing this since 2013. And prior to that, I worked in family violence. I've worked with young sex offenders. I've worked in parenting support, and then youth and family counseling. And so it's been.
Yeah, and what's really cool is you kind of partner with law enforcement on the MIS side of what it is you do, right? Like, can you talk a little bit more about that partnership and why that is, in your opinion, an effective partnership doing the work that you do?
Absolutely. So my program, which was called CRED, the Crime Reduction and Exploitation Diversion Program, is with Pacific Center Family Services, and we started that back in 2013. I created the program, and I went over to Surrey actually, and got some mentoring from Rob Ray and his team at the Surrey RAP program.
Right.
And they're a great big team, yes, but I was only one person.
Yeah.
And so my jurisdiction was all of Greater Victoria. And then we had a meeting about a year into my program with the admin for the MIS team, and they were in the same situation. It was one person manning the entire jurisdiction of Victoria, and there was a lot of overlap, and so the two married basically. I'm now on my third partner. The police officer rotates every 3 or so years.
I'm happy you said that, because I'm thinking maybe you can't work with anybody for 3 years, right? No, but they rotate every 3 years, right?
Yeah, they do. Yeah, they do.
Which is kind of that can be kind of a downer, right? Because, I found in policing that after 3 years, you're just kind of maybe into the groove of the position that you're in now, right? So.
Absolutely. You definitely, and you form a close bond with your partner. Mm-hmm. My current partner, Gord, is amazing. He started with me in January, and he hit the ground running. And as he said, about his third weekend, I said, "So how are you finding it?" And he said, "It's like drinking, trying to take a drink from a fire hose. Like,
yeah,
it's intense work, but we work really well together, and we have the similar goals. Both come from a compassionate perspective. So it's been really great. And it's been an important piece because, when you're working with youth who are being exploited, you kind of need both worlds. So we're able to work on the prevention side. We're able to work on the impact of the trauma on that youth, but we're also able to work on finding who these predators are, right, and working towards hopefully putting a stop to these individuals.
So let's get to the question, shall we? So first question I'm going to ask you is, what spawned the documentary that you're just completing now, Tug of War? What spawned that?
Well, it really came out of this work is tough. It's not all rainbows and sunshine, and so one of the things that was a reoccurring theme for me was how unknown this issue is to people, not only in Victoria, but I think in most communities. When we start to talk about this to the average person, jaws drop. I like to joke that I often don't get invited back to a second dinner party, because people will, of course, always say, "So what do you do?" And I say, "Oh, I work in exploitation prevention." And I usually just try to end it there, but people ask questions. And once you get me started, Will. And so people are shocked at what is happening to our youth and our children. And so it made me realize, we need to get these stories out there.
Yeah, and important stories they are as well. And how many people have you interviewed so far? Like, who are the people that you interviewed for the documentary? Are they just survivors, or is it parents, caregivers, law enforcement? Like, who did you interview in the documentary?
Yeah, a mix actually. We interviewed some parents, some survivors, professionals, people who work in the counseling field or social work field, police, anyone who is somehow involved in the work that is involved in either sex trafficking, sexual exploitation, or gangs.
Yeah, we were blessed. I mean, you came and interviewed us as well, and I showed you some of the things that were going on in the deep web with some of the technology that we have. And I'm just really looking forward to when this documentary comes out, because I think it's so important. Knowledge and the understanding and application of that knowledge is power. And I think that that's what this documentary is really going to do. It's going to shine a light on an issue that has been around forever. People don't want to talk about it, but we need to talk about it. And I'm really looking forward to it. When it does come out, I'm looking forward to pushing it on all our social media feeds as well, because I think it's that important. It really is.
Well, thanks, Darren. And it's, I was just talking about how little people know, and I'm surrounded in this world. And yet, even, when we interviewed you, I was blown away at how much more I didn't know. Yeah. And that's the thing with this issue, is that, it's constantly evolving, both positively, but also in some very real negative ways.
I think one of the things that is enlightening, encouraging for me, is to see probably over the past 1.5 to 2 years now, how countries and organizations are now starting to team together to deal with this. Because it was really a siloed approach, I've found, to dealing with this issue. And so as a result of that, I think countries and organizations are now starting to team together to really start getting a handle on this issue, which I think is really good. And it's so cool to see that we here in Victoria, specifically you, are now playing a part in that by producing such a documentary, and I really look forward to that. So, second question I have for you is, law enforcement and child welfare organizations have seen an anecdotal spike in online sexual exploitation, predation of youth. What have you seen, and are there online platforms that are more popular for recruitment that you think both parents and teens should know about? Interesting question.
Yeah, well, and, as I said, it's constantly evolving. I, for one, cannot keep up on, there's always a new platform. And don't get me wrong, I'm a bit of a social media hound myself.
Yeah.
You might find me on social media.
just a little bit, Mia. Your digital footprint, maybe just a little bit. Right.
I pretend that it's for research basis. But the sad truth is that as much fun and entertainment and knowledge there is out there, predators also use it to groom. And so, Ask FM, Snapchat, fans only. There, when we first started, we were concerned about Facebook, and now I literally can't keep up. Instagram is another big one. And so that's where a lot of the grooming happens. That's where a lot of, even things like drug dealing happens.
Yeah.
If it exists, I can guarantee that predators are using it to groom.
What I like to
subtly.
What I like to say is, prior to the internet, wherever youth gathered, there would be those who would prey upon youth. And so the same can apply to the internet. And, one of the things I try to get across to parents is it's no longer like we parents are what the kids call boomers. We still see a difference between the online world and the offline world. But to to the youth today, it's one world, or what academia likes to call the on-life world. So one of the things that we share with parents is that no matter where youth are online, there are going to be those who are going to want to target youth for sure online. And the other thing I think is important to understand for parents is that there's different type of predators online, like commercial sex exploiters, commonly known as pimps, or cappers, individuals who want to target especially young men to do sexual things in front of their cameras for the purpose of a sextortion. So, for cases like that, we find that a lot of the streaming apps out there, like Omegle is a good example, is a prime breeding ground for these individuals. But you're right? Wherever the kids are online, they're going to be those who will prey upon them. Any more comments on that?
Well, yeah, I mean, the other piece you brought up, how predators used to work old school. So yeah, they'd go to the park, they'd go to the school, they'd go to the malls, and they had to do the hard, engaging work one-on-one. Now that is gone. Now they can literally throw out a wide net and reel in so many youth. So it's for the youth or the person, and I'm saying youth, but there's so many adults that are catfished and preyed upon as well, in the online world. But people can literally be targeting and grooming, hundreds of people at a time. Yeah. And to the one person, it feels very real. But to the exploiter, it's just, a day at the office.
I totally get it. Next question I have for you is, I know that you interviewed many youth who were survivors of online sexual exploitation and predation. Were there any common themes, such as the grooming process or what was going on in the grooming process, that you heard from these survivors specific to those who commercially exploit them? I'd love to hear some of your thoughts on there, because one of the things that we like to do is education is important, especially when it comes to prevention. So understanding how that grooming process works is important. So it would be interesting for me and our viewers to know, were there some common themes that you found taking place?
Yeah, it's all around relationship building. So in some aspects, it is, friendship based, but in most cases, it's what we call boyfriending. So that is a big piece. And a lot of the groomers will just start to be able to track what the young person is posting and to see what their needs are, to see what their interests are. And then they start to build, a relationship. And so to the young person, it feels like, oh, this person really gets me. This person knows exactly what I need and how I think. And that's because they've been trolling the young person. Mm-hmm. And so that's a big piece. The other piece is money and fame. So that's another a theme that young people are really drawn to. And so there is, a lot of promises around, we're going to make you a star. You're going to, a rap star, a hip hop star, or big in the pop culture world right now. That's something that we're definitely seeing.
I know that in some of the research and some of the work that we do working with families, we find that these commercialized sexual exploiters, I like to call them pimps, they like to target individuals who maybe come from foster care, government care, maybe teens from the LGBTQ plus community, First Nations youth. Do you find that they're very target specific, like they kind of know who their target is going to be, or not? Like I would love to hear from your experience.
Yeah, it's initially we found that the risk factors were with individuals who were vulnerable based on some of their experiences. Maybe there is trauma in their background. Maybe their family is in flux. Maybe there is poverty. So those risk factors are definitely still something that we look for. But since since social media, since the internet, we have a high number of survivors and youth who come from atypical backgrounds in which their families are intact. There isn't any trauma. Financial issues are not something that they're challenged with, and so that has been interesting. And so what we found is that the desire for fame and acclaim is a big draw for them, and so it has definitely shifted as the value of social media has increased in young people's worlds. We definitely see an evening out of who is targeted and who responds. Definitely, protective factors do decrease a young person's chance of being groomed and exploited, but it doesn't.
So what I just heard you say, me, is it crosses every socioeconomic background then, right? Like it truly
exactly.
does. Yeah. Next question I have for you is, one thing that we have seen during COVID is an increase in sugaring, especially amongst those who identify as female. We have now helped 7 youth. The youngest was 14, and their family, given that they were now being stalked or extorted by their sugar daddy. Can you please share with our audience what is sugaring and why are you turning to sugaring? And we've seen a real boom in this over the past 18 months. We really have here at the White Hatter, right? And the number of youth and families that have reached out to us. In fact, the youngest, like I said, was 14, and the parents had no idea that this youth was engaged in there. So I'd love to hear your thoughts. What is it, and what are you finding?
Yeah, sugaring has become so normalized amongst young people that it's considered almost commonplace. So one of the things, so with sugaring, what is happening is that the young person engages in a online relationship usually, but it can go offline, whereby they are supplying their sugar daddy with either photos. Sometimes it can just start off as conversation. So again, they're groomed so that at first it seems benign, and so they're provided money, they're given money for videos, conversation, text, photos, but then it can quickly move offline, and then there's the expectation of sex, and we've seen in many cases where the sugar daddy becomes quite controlling, and it can become violent.
Yeah, it's interesting. We've, like I said, we've helped a number of youth and their families out now, and and we've got a couple of stories that we've written about in articles. We have a whole chapter in our book on it that I'll talk about at the end of the presentation. But we're now seeing the commercialized sex exploiters moving to sugaring, i.e., on OnlyFans sites as the digital way of pimping, right? I hate using that word, but that's what a lot of people associate it with, right? They're commercial sexualized exploiters. And what's very interesting is the vast majority of youth that have connected with us, it started with feet pictures, right? Like, send me a foot picture, I'll give you $250 as a weekly allowance. But you know what? Over time, like you say, as they groom them, they'll say, well, you know what? If you send me a picture of your boob, I'll give you $500. Or if you give me a full meal deal, I'll give you $1,000, right? Over time. And a lot of these young people think, well, that disinhibition effect of the internet, because I'm not face to face with this person, they don't know who I am or where I live, it kind of, they think it's safe, right? When in fact it can't be. And a number of these youth that we've helped, unknown to them, what they were doing was also being recorded by the sugar daddy and now used for the purposes of extortion. Thoughts, comments?
Absolutely. And you nailed it when you said that they think it's safe, they think it's benign. And I remember speaking to one young person, and she scoffed at me and said, well, can you think of another way that I can make $100 in 2 minutes without even touching someone?
Yeah.
And so again, it is so normalized, and even the word sugaring has been used to replace and soften what it actually is, which is sex trade work.
Yeah.
And so for young people, if you have a conversation with them and talk about the sex trade and they will deny, no, I'm not into prostitution, I'm not a sex trade worker, and then we break it down.
And I mean, you nailed it, right? And one of the things that we found is that a lot of these sugar daddies, they're exploiting vulnerability, right? A good example is two teens that we worked with. They were both getting ready to go to college or university. Both were working jobs to make money. COVID hit. They lost their jobs. They had no source of income. They started to panic. So as a result of that, they turned to sugaring as a way to make survival money, is what they called it, in order to go to college or go to university to survive. Well, that was a vulnerability that these sugar daddies picked up on and drove home with, right? Comments on that? Like, did you see the same? Like, were you finding like some who were doing sugar? We met another parent, single parent, mother, lost her job, young child, had no money for food, or so that she turned to sugaring in order to make survival money so that she could feed her kid and put diapers on her kid, right?
Absolutely. COVID definitely, we also saw an increase in it. And there's no lack for sites. There's no lack for sugaring sites. They're everywhere. And the other piece too is within, inflation. Victoria, for example, is a very expensive city to live. Kids are going to university, and it feels for them as a relatively safe, easy way to make some money.
Yeah, and I can share firsthand. Like I said, we've helped a number of youth now where they thought it was safe, and it wasn't, because they weren't, number one, they weren't doing it correctly, or they thought they were, and they were leaving themselves to all types of vulnerability. And as a result, it came back to kick them really hard. And, we speak in depth in that in the free web book. Again, we'll talk about this at the end. Do you talk about sugaring in the documentary that's coming up?
Well, it's funny that you say that. I don't, it's all a blur, but I don't think I've specifically spoken about sugaring. I have a youth right now where this is the issue. And when it started, again, it was safe. She was in control, and now that's very much the opposite. And I can't talk too much about it because I'm actually dealing with it as we speak. But it's become a very unsafe situation.
If she wants to learn by some examples, let me know, because I can provide you with some really good examples. On the other side, I spoke to a 21-year-old who in 5 months had made $89,000.
Well, that's the thing.
The lure of money, the lure of easy money, or what they think is easy money, and it's not easy, right?
Yeah, and it's easy until it no longer is, and that's the piece that, if we could supply every person with a crystal ball to see what is going to be the consequences, we would definitely see a decrease in the amount of people. The other piece too is these are usually middle-aged men, and they are seeking out young children. Like they're, like you said, I know
they're exploiters.
12-year-olds.
Let's call them what they are. They're exploiters, right? They're exploiting vulnerability, right?
Absolutely. And it's.
I know you want to use some bad words. I can read it in your face right now. I know you want to say some really bad words. I can see it in your face right now, but
I guess I have it done.
Yeah, I think we all would agree that these individuals are nothing more than bottom feeder, predator, exploiters. That's what they are, right? And taking and the vulnerability. That's what it is, right? Next question I have for you is, I did that one. Here it is. Currently, human trafficking is a low risk, and this came from Not in My City Learning. Just a great site. They have some free training where you, as a parent, you can go there and learn more about this. And they said, currently human trafficking is a low risk, high profit business. It must become a high risk, low profit business if we want to make a difference. So here's my question to you is, based upon your experience, what can we and others do to make this a high risk, low profit business? Because I agree with their statement, right?
Yeah, it really is. It's such a tough and challenging thing because so our team has collaborated with the SVU team and other parts of the police department.
When you say SVU, just for our viewers, what does SVU stand for?
The Special Victims Unit. So they are the unit in the police department who specialize in sexual assault, sexual offense-based crimes. Mm-hmm. And so their training is working with victims of sexual assaults and sex crimes. So we have paired with them a couple of times with some projects around trying to help young girls who are being trafficked to exit. And what we've been finding is you can see the fear on the girls' faces. We've had some where they, started to talk, but then they stopped. And so it's definitely something that needs more education around, just in terms of every community. This is happening.
Yeah.
And I think the more that people become educated around the issue, the more that we can start to put pressure on these pimps. They often do a circuit. They'll go across Canada. Victoria is one of their stops. And especially when there are events like sports events or, like the Calgary Stampede or Olympics, football games, any of those kinds of things, you will see traffickers will then bring their girls to that city because it's supply and demand. And then there's things that there's programs like Bar Watch. A lot of cities have things like Bar Watch. I think the more that communities and business owners ask for this, then I think it makes a difference, because then pimps use flashy restaurants and fun as a way to groom and bring in new girls. If they're not able to go to a bar, if they're not able to go to a restaurant, if they're not able to go to see a hockey game because they are identified as a bad person,
right?
And they've been banned, then that's going to help, I think, make a difference in terms of the
I also
risk
think
for them.
I'll also speak from my experience. I think the courts need to do more on sentencing. I mean, we both know of a family here on Vancouver Island who were convicted for this. They ended up doing 2 years less a day, and the day they got out, they went right back into the game again, as they like to call it, and it made big headlines when they were stopped traveling into Saskatchewan in 2 SUVs from 2 teens from here in British Columbia that were being moved into Saskatchewan to do the same thing because, so I'm going to jail. They got 2.5 years or 2 years less a day. I think they ended up doing like 12 months, 18 months in jail, and then they got out. So the cost of doing business for them, who cares? Like, I'm doing 18 months in jail. Who cares, right? Like, the amount of money I'm going to make when I get out is going to go up dramatically. So I think, yes, it needs to be kind of like a Lego approach, using Keegan's analogy here at the school, right, with his citrine animation, his Lego stuff. But, doing the education, like you say, with Bar Watch and getting these individuals out of the game. But I also think hitting them where they need to be hit with respect to punishment is important as well. Like, do you have comments on that? I know you probably have to be a little careful about this.
Yeah, I do have to be careful.
Yeah.
But I couldn't agree with you more. It is so it's so frustrating to see these individuals back out. We were also very aware of them prior to what happened.
Yep.
And yet we were unable to get
traction.
Yeah, and in BC, for instance, how the court system is that it's Crown who lays the charges.
Yep.
They're the ones who decide. So police will do all this work, and then they give their report to Crown Counsel, and if Crown Counsel decides that there isn't enough to meet their threshold, then it doesn't go anywhere. And so we've had many situations where our team has put forward a report to Crown Counsel, and there isn't enough, and so that's frustrating. So we have to sit back and wait for another victim or for more criminal activity before something can be done. So
see, now that I'm retired from law enforcement, I can be way more vocal on this, right? Because like you, I had to be careful because we work with Crown very closely when we're in law enforcement. But you're right. BC is one of the few provinces in Canada that when it comes to laying a charge, it's not the police. Every other province, it's the police can lay a charge. Here in the province of British Columbia, it's Crown Counsel that actually lays a charge. And you're right. If it doesn't meet a specific threshold, then it doesn't get approved. Although it's clear that you could probably get a guilty conviction on this, it's still not approved, which is ridiculous. But again, until such time as I think that we start hitting these organized crime groups, or even, when people think organized crime, they think big groups. No, organized crime could be one or two people, right? Or a family, doing what, until we start hitting them with significant criminal consequences to their actions. And what's the impetus for change? There is none, because the amount of money that they're making by doing this far outweighs the fact that they're going to Club Fed for 18 months to sit back while their business is still being run outside, right? It's just a cost of doing business. So, you can see I'm a little passionate about that issue.
Yeah.
So
yeah, well, the other piece too is that people don't understand is how much manpower it takes. So, for instance, we knew what these people were up to. And there's a lot of talk about defund the police, and for me, it's the absolute opposite. If there was more funding, there would be more opportunities to be able to create a project and for police to be able to focus on. It's not like on TV,
got that right.
Right. And people don't seem to understand that. And so, there was always like, well, why didn't they get them? Why? Well, because we didn't have, and I'm saying we because I'm thinking of my team, but the police did not have the funding to be able to hand over X amount of police members to focus on just that one team. And I can tell you, because I'm very aware of our caseload, we have hundreds. And so that takes manpower, and that takes funding. And so it's very frustrating for me because we know who the bad guys are.
And that's why I'm hoping that down the road that there'll be more public-private partnerships. Like, I mean, we've worked with a number of families now where the police said they couldn't do anything about it, so they connect with us. We do the investigation. We put the package together, right, wrap it up in a really nice bow and give it to them. They take it to law enforcement, and law enforcement goes, oh, all the work's been done for us. Let's lay the charge. But, another thing that that people don't understand. In order to investigate these types of criminals, it takes resources. We're talking tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars to conduct these types of undercover operations, where in the end, we may get an arrest, but we're still not guaranteed that Crown is going to run with the charge, right? So again, my feeling is, yeah, education is important, but so is the enforcement component, doing the investigations, but also in the criminal justice system. Until we start hitting these individuals hard, it's just a cost of doing business. Big deal, right? And as long as that goes on, we're going to have more victims taking place. Last question I have for you. It's actually a two-parter. So based upon your experience and expertise in this specific area of concern, what would be your message to parents and caregivers about the awareness and prevention strategies? And the second part of that question is, what would be your message to youth about awareness and prevention strategies as well? So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that based upon your experience. Like, what's your message to parents on this specific topic?
Educate yourself while your children are very young. And often what happens is that, you have this healthy child who's doing well in school, who's engaged in sports, and you cannot even imagine that based on their presentation, based on who they are, based on everything you know about them, that they themselves would find themselves in a situation where they are groomed and exploited. And one of the things that we haven't touched on in here is how exploiters, pimps, gang members use drugs as a tool in their grooming. And so many, I'd say probably at least 90% of the young people that we work with end up experiencing some sort of addiction based on the grooming that has taken place. And so now you have parents who are not only struggling with the impact of how they're being groomed and exploited and maybe trafficked, but also their child is now addicted to substances. So that's a big piece. Educate yourself early on so that you can be aware of the resources in your community, be aware of the signs of grooming and recruitment, start having those really important conversations with your children early on, because once they're in it, then okay, boomer is what you'll is what you'll end up hearing.
My son says that to me all the time.
Right? Because the reality is this is normal. They don't know any different. This is normal. And so when we come along as adults and say, well, you have to be aware of this and this, they think that we are dinosaurs, and maybe we are, but we also do have the awareness of pre online and what's happening now. The other piece too is that, and this is a fairly controversial topic, is
I love controversy.
I
love controversy.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that parents often are concerned about is that once their child is involved, they can't be made to go to treatment, for example. Youth have to voluntarily agree to get treatment.
Right.
And so this is a very confusing thing for adults, because for them, they think, well, it's a no-brainer. My child is at risk. They're being trafficked. They're being exploited. We have children dying. That's the other piece. It's not reported on the news how many children are dying from the opioid crisis, unless the parent comes forward. And we've had a really tough year this year. We've had many deaths. So that's been a struggle that the communities are not aware of. So it's tough for parents because they don't know where to turn. Again, in some other provinces, they have secure care facilities.
Alberta.
Which is Alberta, yep. And so secure care is basically, it's like a treatment center that young people can be mandated to attend. And so what happens is, a parent or caregiver goes before the court, explains to the courts what the concerns are, and it's usually around exploitation, sexual exploitation, and
Substance abuse. Yeah.
Substance abuse, exactly. And based on the information presented before them, the court may decide, yes, this is an appropriate situation. And so the youth is then mandated to attend treatment. There's a lot of controversy around that, specifically around, the children's rights to freedom, which I, of course, completely understand. And my argument is, they are not free. They are being exploited by an adult. Usually, they're usually being pimped out, and they are tied to their drug. And to ask a young person to voluntarily put themselves in a state of withdrawal is a really big ask. I mean, if a child is hungry for a few hours, that's a horrible pain for them. But now we're supposed to expect them to do something like agree to withdrawal. So I just feel like.
And your advice to kids? So you just talked about parents. What about kids, right? What about teens?
Yeah,
what would be your advice if you in less than a minute? What would you say would be your advice to the teens out there?
Also, to get educated, and that's one of our goals, is we're going into the schools earlier and earlier, and just being able to show them what the reality is, what to look for in grooming, what we talk about boyfriending, we talk about the risks, we talk about what other people's experiences have been. Education is key. It's sometimes not all that fun, but it is key, and to know where to turn, that, and to know that there's no shame. If you have been sugaring, if you have been exploited, it's the sugar daddy who should feel shame.
That's right.
It's the exploiter who should feel shame. There's no shame in being somebody who has experienced or survived or been victim of
and that's the other thing. I mean, and that's why I think your documentary Tug of War is going to be so important to get into the schools, right? For the education. But, one of the things I say to parents is, don't be judgmental. When your child comes forward, or you figure out as a parent that your child's involved in something, don't become judgmental, right? Like, don't use shame and be judgment, because that'll just shut the child down. If the child comes forward,
Absolutely.
It's the first step in the recovery process. They're seeking help from you as the parent. And so being non-judgmental in how you communicate, which can sometimes be very hard for parents, don't get me wrong. But if there's one thing I say to parents, is that if your child does come forward, or if you are kind of, trust that gut instinct, the million years of evolution that the Creator's given us to stay safe, is telling you something's wrong, dig deep, right? Because something's going on, but don't be judgmental.
Absolutely. And to start being an approachable parent.
Yes.
From the time they are little, because that way, that relationship of parent and child being able to trust communication and having a response that is not going to shame is started early on. If you haven't been approachable about some of the small things in life, children are not going to come forward to you for the big things. And that's been a key piece. They will go elsewhere. They will go to the exploiter.
So let's hold on, Maya. Thank you very much. Hold on. I'm going to talk to you at the end of the show here. I just want to do my closing. I mean, wow. I mean, such an important topic. And what I love about Mia is that she brings her passion, her experience, and her love of young people, right? Like, it's just amazing. And her team, her Miss team, are doing some magical things. And I just thought, this is a topic that we need to be talking about more. It's tough for parents to, number one, talk about it because they have no knowledge on what's going on. This is why I love the documentary that's going to come out again, Tug of War. Stay tuned for that, right? I think it's going to be such an important tool for us parents to have in our quivers, but also an important tool to allow kids to watch. Because like Mia said, when I was younger, if my dad said something to me, yeah, whatever. But if I heard it from somebody else, it's got to be true. Although that other somebody else is saying the same thing that I said as a parent, so these are things that we need to be alive to as parents and being open and honest with them. And on that note, the other thing I want to bring to your attention, if you want to read more about this topic, we here at the White Hatter have written our book. It's free. It costs you nothing. It's 23 chapters now. It's a web book, so we can always update it, which we're doing. Like I just updated the chapter on online gaming, and we dedicate 2 whole chapters to issues surrounding online predation, exploitation, and sugaring. And again, like Mia said, it's knowledge, and the understanding and application of that knowledge is power. And that's what that book is all about. So again, big tip of my white hat to Mia for joining us for our first Thinkable Thursday this year. And we look forward to having you all join us for our next Thinkable Thursday. So stay tuned to all our social media feeds when that's going to happen next. So on behalf of the entire White Hatter team, and again, big shout out and thank you to Mia. Thank you for attending and watching today's presentation. Bye, everybody.